Imagine testing positive to an illness that has made you seriously ill. Then imagine being told you don't have permission to treat it so you can get better. I don't need to imagine it because I'm living it every day. This is my story. It's a story I shouldn't have to tell. It's a story of how something from 20 years ago, the size of a poppy seed, changed my life forever. I'm one of the lucky ones because I'm alive to tell this story. In order to understand where I am now, you need to understand where I was before. I was a kid who grew up in Kwinana. After university, I spent 10 years working and volunteering in America, Africa, Canada, and Vietnam. I came back to Kwinana and started working with kids in the community. I founded Dance for Africa and Kwinana Children's Choir. I became the youngest female councillor to ever be elected to the city of Kwinana. Then I moved to the Wheat Belt to start a program running camps, specialising in working with kids affected by trauma and torture. The results we were getting started receiving attention. I became a Churchill Fellow and Westpac Scholar. I was announced as the AgriFuture's Australian Rural Woman of the Year and was awarded an honorary doctorate from Edith Cowan University. I was working over 100 hours a week, completing camps, then hopping on flights right across Australia to talk about the work we were doing. I was at the height of my career. Then it all came crashing down. For years, people had seen this side of me. What they didn't know was that I had a secret. The secret was I was extremely ill and going downhill fast. It was a secret because despite numerous doctor's visits, nobody could work out what was wrong with me. Doctors told me, "You're a high-achieving female. It'll be anxiety, depression, or stress." Others implied it was all in my head. Luckily, I found a doctor who recognised my symptoms, and we arranged for my blood to be sent to an internationally accredited lab in Germany for testing. 2 months later, the results were in. I had Lyme disease. In 2005, I worked at summer camp in America in what we now know was a Lyme endemic area. I did an overnight camp in the woods and found a tick attached to my stomach the next day. I had a weird rash shaped like a bullseye a few weeks later, but I thought nothing of it. I wish I had. Lyme disease happens when a tick or other insect bites you and injects a bacteria called Borrelia into your bloodstream. For years, that bacteria had been swirling around my body undetected. Doctors hadn't picked up on it because Lyme disease is not recognised in Australia. The delay in diagnosis meant my Lyme was now in the chronic stage, and the news just kept getting worse. I tested positive to 3 other tick-borne infections as well, we think from the same tick bite. More testing was carried out. I had bilateral neurological foot drop, severe posterior tibial tendon dysfunction, and motor, sensory, and autonomic neuropathy. The infections triggered something called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which means I can't keep a regular heart rate or blood pressure. I go into severe tachycardia or fast heart rate multiple times a day by doing something as simple as standing. Even tasks like emptying the dishwasher or having a shower can cause me to pass out. I can't work, I can't drive, I can't even leave the house unaccompanied. I moved back to Kwinana. It was a place I felt safe. It was for the most part accessible, offered the rehab facilities I needed, and plenty of places I could go to when it all got too much. When I got my diagnosis, I was relieved because I finally knew what was wrong with me. I could start having treatment and get better, or so I thought. But I soon discovered I'd managed to get the most controversial disease in the world. The Australian health system does not recognise Lyme disease and says that it does not exist in Australian ticks. This is based on a single 1994 study that failed to find Borrelia in Australian ticks. It ignores the studies before and after it that found otherwise, as well as the thousands of people across Australia who have tested positive without even leaving the country. In my case though, the debate over whether Australian ticks carry Lyme is irrelevant because I didn't get bitten here. I got bitten in what we now know is a Lyme endemic area overseas. Despite this, doctors are still only allowed to treat my symptoms, which are getting worse by the day. It's what I call a band-aid fix. Imagine if we told a cancer patient we could treat their symptoms but not the cancer causing them. There would be an outrage. I face the same barriers to diagnosis as people who have been bitten by ticks here in Australia. This is because it's not on the radar of GPs, and if you do bring it up, doctors are too afraid to speak to you about it because of the fear of repercussion or being struck off the medical register. It takes an average of 10 years for a patient to get a diagnosis of Lyme disease in Australia. That's exactly how long it took me. And in that time, I got sicker and sicker. Denying the existence of a disease affecting millions of people around the world isn't helping anyone. We need to talk about it. We need education, and we need to let the amazing doctors out there with a special interest in Lyme have permission to treat their patients. It's time for a change. That's why I decided to make this video. The Lyme boat well and truly needs to be rocked.